We're going to start this video with a multiple choice question. Who is responsible for our learning, our growth, and ultimately our success in promoting equity in our organization and communities? Is it A, each of us is responsible for ourselves, B, our fairy godmother casting a spell so we can go to the DEI ball until, the hour strokes midnight? Is it C, our old business partner, Jacob Marley, accompanied by three spirits who will teach us the meaning of Christmas and social justice as well? Or is it D, members of certain minority groups expected to do the hard work and heavy lifting for us? Let's find out.
The answer is A. It is self-responsibility, with the other three being very, very much incorrect. Before we move forward, I do want to recap our last theme. As we discussed, we always have context, something that makes us compliment others and others compliment us, no exceptions. Our context isn't set in stone. It shifts and pivots depending on the situation, who we're with, what we're doing, and so on. We know that our perspective is very important, and so too are others. It is through this understanding that brings us to the idea of self-responsibility, knowing we have a specific role to play and only we can truly make the most out of it. Self-responsibility is straightforward to understand, yet difficult to implement. In the context of equity, it is holding ourselves accountable. If we make a mistake, to at minimum learn and do better, if not remedy the situation if we can. It is the commitment to do what is right, to not settle for good enough, and instead make a real impact. It is seeking solutions over excuses. It's so easy to find reasons why we can't promote equity in our work, some of which we'll be covering in this video. It's making that shift to find answers and go for it. Just like anything we have to do that we want to be successful. Accountability, commitment, and solutions. Let's talk strengths. For now, we can assume as local government professionals, we have a few strengths to leverage. For one, we have first-hand experience and insider knowledge in local government. Maybe it's for a particular community, or department, or project, and that's useful. We get to live and breathe it. Day in, day out, even your most active resident isn't going to be spending 40 or more hours a week like we do on the job, seeing what happens in real time. Beyond ourselves, we have professional networks, counties, municipalities, and special districts all doing similar work. Professional associations, conferences, trainings, and more are all chances to connect with others. This should build up our confidence, remind us that we do know a lot, and therefore we have a lot to contribute. And even as people who aren't into the Spider-Man movie still know, with great power comes great responsibility. Which brings us to a less cheerful note. If we look at past struggles like women's suffrage and the civil rights movement, local government's not on the right side of history a lot of the time. Are we personally responsible for the mistakes of the past? Of course not. Is this the legacy of the institutions we belong to now, and we're responsible for what happens next? Yes, I would argue we are. To take personal responsibility is to accept the unfortunate reality that intentionally and systemically there's been inequality in our law enforcement, zoning and land use, education, social services, elections, transportation, all of it. If this makes any of us feel uncomfortable, good. It really should. Let us put a little weight on our shoulders. Let us add on the weight that we think we can carry. One common way we decline responsibility is by playing the bystander, or bystandering. And yes, I know, that's not an actual word. I think it should be, though. For many, it's easy to look at history and assume we're naturally doing better, and a more equitable society is inevitable. Unfortunately, this viewpoint tends to cherry-pick convenient historical events and lacks a more in-depth approach. For an example of something more in-depth, let's look at Pew Research's 2012 study, Pursuing the American Dream, Economic Mobility Across Generations. They split American households into fifths. There was the richest fifth of the population, then the second richest fifth, and so on. What they discovered was that the middle class, that is the three middle groups, did have quite a bit of economic mobility. They also discovered what they called stickiness at the end, that the richest fifth tended to stay up there from generation to generation, and so too did the bottom, the poorest fifth. If we think about this, it makes sense. Once you hit a certain threshold of wealth, it's much easier to pass on to the next generation, just as a certain level of debt and obstacles and hardships will likely pass down as well. If we consider this implication that the poorest statistically tend to stay poor, then the past really does matter. And we can start to see where events that happened 1, 2, even a few generations ago will still impact our world today. Bystandering also assumes neutrality. Just as we've discovered that we always have context, so too are we always participating. Taking no sides usually means just following the status quo, and as we're going to discuss a lot in this series, choosing things as is an active decision. That's why I like to say bystandering, as it really is a verb. But maybe we're just waiting for the right moment. Maybe our intent isn't to be a bystander, we just need the right opportunity. This reasoning assumes that things are going to fall into place conveniently, but that's difficult, especially when we live in the age of endless information. There are so many options of what we choose to watch, read, and listen to that we really have to be intentional to find the sources that are going to help us move forward. And what of our DEI professionals? Well, they're busy doing their own job, fulfilling their role, their piece of the puzzle. They can provide training, they can send out resources, sit down and brainstorm with us. We still have to put it into practice to do our own work in an equitable way. Speaking of, remember at the start of this video when I discussed one option being to rely on people of certain minority groups doing the heavy lifting? There's a name for it. It's called the double burden, where your peer is supposed to do their full-time job and on top of that take on additional, commonly unpaid work if they want to pursue better diversity, belonging, inclusion, and equity. And that's a problem. There's always something that can be done, even if it's just thinking harder about equity for the tasks of the day. There's really no need to wait for the perfect moment to come. Most of the exercises in this book are optional. This is one that really is not. I'd like you to pause this video and read the statement aloud yourself, or if you're in a place where that's difficult, then wait for when you can. As I stated during the introduction of this series, this is really meant for those who are genuinely interested, and this is the benchmark that I'm setting. Of course, even if you don't sign the agreement, you can still keep going, just as you can sign it and simply not follow it. I will say that you will probably not reach a place of action at the end, though. That when we hit that last theme, that theme of taking action, that you're likely going to shrug and say, oh well, that was nice, and move on. So take your time, read it aloud, and make the choice that's right for you. And if you want to take it a step forward, then consider stepping up into a leadership role. This guidebook will help form a solid foundation. There's a lot out there that can help you take a stronger leadership role to help others in turn. The caveat is it needs to be earned. Just like you generally need to get some education experience before you get to be a city manager or county administrator or department head, so too do we need to put in the work to be a leader in equity. And that's self-responsibility. We'll continue to dig in deep in our next theme, internal barriers.